Good day. We are second-year students of Bachelor of Science in Accountancy of Xavier University Ateneo de Cagayan. Today, we will be discussing few topics in relation to the corporate world. First off, let us first define what a corporation is. So a corporation is a legal form of business that is separate and distinct from its owners. Within the context of Philippine law, there are 4 attributes of a corporation. So a corporation is treated as an artificial being created by operation of law, having the right of succession and the powers, attributes, and properties expressly authorized by law are incident to its existence. As mentioned earlier, there are 4 attributes of a corporation. Let's go on through these attributes one by one. First is, it is an artificial being. An artificial being is an entity that is recognized by law as a legal person or a body holding legal rights and duties distinct from the individuals who comprise it. Being separate from its owners, a corporation can sue and be sued as well as hold property in its name. Second, it is created by operation of law. It cannot come into existence by mere agreement of the parties, as in the case of business partnerships. Corporations require exclusive authority or grant from the state, either by a special incorporation law that directly creates the corporation or through general corporation law. Third attribute is that it enjoys the right of succession. A corporation has the capacity of continued existence subject to the period stated in the Articles of Incorporation. The death, withdrawal, insolvency, or incapacity of the individual shareholders or members will not dissolve the corporation. Last but not least, it has the power, attributes, and properties expressly authorized by law or incident to its existence. This means that a corporation, being a mere creature of law, has such powers only as are expressly or impliedly conferred upon it by the Articles of Incorporation. What comprises a corporation? A corporation is comprised by stakeholders. These are any individual or group or party that has an interest in any organization and the outcomes of its action. It can also affect or be affected by the organization's actions, objectives, and policies. You might be wondering who these stakeholders really are, specifically are. So these stakeholders are customers, employees, investors, owners, suppliers, creditors, communities, and government agencies. In order for a corporation or any business to function well, it needs to have good governance. Governance is the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a business's economic and social resources for development and growth. So, in other words, governance is the establishment of policies and continuous monitoring of their proper implementation by the members of the governing body of an organization. It includes the mechanisms required to balance the powers of members and their primary duty of enhancing the prosperity and viability of the organization. There are 8 characteristics of good governance, so let's go over these characteristics and discuss each of them. First is rule of law. Good governance requires fair legal frameworks that are enforced by an impartial regulatory body for the full protection of stakeholders. Second is transparency. It means that information should be provided in easily understandable forms and media, that it should be freely available and directly accessible to those who will be affected by government policies and practices, as well as the outcomes resulting from it, and that any decisions that are taken and their enforcement are in compliance with established rules and regulations. Next is responsiveness. Good governance requires that organization and their processes be designed to serve the best interests of stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. Fourth characteristic is consensus-oriented. Good governance requires consultation to understand the different interests of stakeholders to reach a broad consensus of what is in the best interest of the entire stakeholder group and how this can be achieved sustainably and prudently. Next is equity and inclusiveness. The organization that provides the opportunity for its stakeholders to maintain, enhance, or generally improve their well-being offers the most compelling message regarding its reason for existence and value to society. Sixth is effectiveness and efficiency. Good governance means that the processes implemented by the organization to produce favorable results meet the needs of its stakeholders while making the best use of resources, human, technological, financial, natural, and environmental, at its disposal. Seventh is accountability. Accountability is a crucial tenet of good governance. Whoever is accountable for what should be documented in policy statements. In general, an organization is accountable to those who will be affected by its decisions or actions as well as the applicable rules of law. Lastly, participation. Participation by both men and women, either directly or through legitimate representatives, is a crucial cornerstone of good governance. Participation needs to be informed and organized, including freedom of expression and attentive concern for the best interests of the organization and society in general. There is a certain governance in the corporate world. We call it corporate governance. Corporate governance is the system of rules, practices, and processes by which business corporations are directed and controlled. Corporate governance mainly involves balancing the interests of a company's many stakeholders, such as shareholders, senior management executives, customers, suppliers, financiers, the government, and the community. Since corporate governance also provides a framework for attaining a company's objectives, it encompasses practically every sphere of management, from action plans and internal controls to performance measures and corporate disclosures. There are 4 P's of corporate governance. These are people, purpose, process, and performance. What is the purpose of corporate governance? The purpose of corporate governance is to facilitate effective, entrepreneurial, and prudent management that can deliver the long-term success of the company. It also aims to help build an environment of trust, transparency, and accountability necessary for fostering long-term investment, financial stability, and business integrity, thereby supporting more substantial growth and more inclusive societies. It also enhances shareholders' value and protects the interests of other stakeholders by improving corporate performance and accountability. It is about what the board of directors of a company does, how it sets the values of the business firm. There are 4 basic objectives of corporate governance: fair and equitable treatment of shareholders, self-assessment, increased shareholders' wealth, and transparency and full disclosure. First is fair and equitable treatment of shareholders. A corporate governance structure ensures equitable treatment of all the shareholders of the company. All shareholders deserve equitable treatment, and this equity is assured by a good governance structure in any organization. Second is self-assessment. Corporate governance allows firms to assess their behavior and actions before regulatory agencies scrutinize them. Firms with a robust corporate governance systems are better able to limit their exposure to regulatory risks and fines. An active and independent board can successfully point out the loopholes in the company operations and help solve issues internally. Third is, it increases shareholders' wealth. The main objective of corporate governance is to protect the long-term interests of the shareholders. Firms with stable corporate governance structures are seen to have higher valuation premiums attached to their shares. This shows that the market perceives good corporate governance as an incentive for the shareholders to invest in the company. Last but not least, Transparency and full disclosure. Good corporate governance aims to ensuring a higher degree of transparency in an organization by encouraging full disclosure of transactions in the company accounts. Full disclosure includes compliance with regulations and disclosing any information relevant to the shareholders. Transparency involves disclosure of all forms of conflict of interest. The basic principles of good and effective corporate governance includes transparency and full disclosure, accountability, and corporate control. What does good governance promote? Good governance sets the normative standards of development. It fosters participation, ensures transparency, demands accountability, promotes efficiency, and upholds the rule of law in economic, political, and administrative institutions and processes. There are plenty of benefits of good governance, and these are as follows. The essence of any system of good corporate governance is that it allows the board and management the freedom to drive their organization forward and to exercise that freedom within a framework of effective accountability.
Now, we're in for the part 2 of our presentation, which is Corporate Governance, Responsibilities, and Accountability. In this part, we will tackle about CSR and its importance and other information in regards to it. Corporate social responsibility is a self-regulating business model that helps a company be socially accountable to itself, its stakeholders, and the public. To engage in CSR means that, in the ordinary course of business, a company is operating in ways that enhance society and the environment, instead of contributing negatively to them. CSR is also important to both consumers and companies. By practicing CSR, also called as corporate citizenship, companies can be conscious of the kind of impact they are having on all aspects of society, including economic, social, and environmental. Through CSR programs, businesses can benefit society while boosting their brands. CSR activities can also help forge a stronger bond between employees and corporations, boost morale, and help both employees and employers feel more connected with the world around them. A correctly implemented CSR concept can bring along a variety of competitive advantages, such as enhanced access to capital and markets, increased sales and profits, operational cost savings, improved productivity and quality, efficient human resource base, improved brand image and reputation, enhanced customer loyalty, better decision-making, and risk management processes. There are 5 types of corporate social responsibility. One is corporate philanthropy, corporate volunteerism, environmental leadership, ethical labor practices, and economic responsibility. There are 3 P's to consider in corporate social responsibility: the people, planet, and profit. These are some of the contemporary issues that affect corporate social responsibility: demands for greater disclosure, increased consumer interest, the shrinking role of the government, growing investor pressure, competitive labor markets, and supplier relations. The policy-making role of the government is crucial for promoting CSR between different industries at the national level, encouraging a tightening of standards across the board. Improving disclosure and transparency of often hidden social responsibility practices within the private sphere is key to building a broader confidence in the way business is run. In a public corporation, the shareholders or the owners delegate responsibilities to the board of directors, executive management, operational management, and the internal auditors, of which these 4 have accountabilities to the stakeholders, the shareholders or the owners, external auditors, regulators, society, and the others. The shareholders delegate responsibilities through an elected board of directors to management, and in turn to operating units with oversight and assistance from internal directors. Decisions concerning the company's goals and overall performance often require shareholder approval, which includes changes to the constitution of the company, declaring a dividend, buying or selling stock, approving the annual reports on management compensation, and approving the financial statements of the company. The management is responsible for managing the organization effectively and providing accurate and timely reports to shareholders and stakeholders. The board are typically elected by shareholders at annual meetings and are responsible for overseeing the affairs of the organization and protecting the interests of the shareholders. They are also responsible in setting goals, supporting executive duties, and ensuring the company has adequate, well-managed resources at its disposal. The parties involved in corporate governance are the shareholders, the board of directors, the non-executive or independent directors, the management, the audit committees of the board of directors, the regulators, which are the Board of Accountancy, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the external and internal auditors. Corporate finance, the agency problem usually refers to a conflict of interest between a company's management and the company's stockholders. The manager, acting as the agent for the shareholders, is supposed to make decisions that will maximize shareholder wealth, even though it is in the manager's best interest to maximize his wealth. This can be mitigated with the right incentives and contract design. The agency problem can also be overcome by requiring full transparency, placing restrictions on the agent's capabilities, and tying the compensation structure to the well-being of the principal. The effects of agency in governance are inefficiency, financial losses, market failure, and cost of monitoring or incentives. Goal congruence is defined as consistency or agreement of individual goals with company goals.
Hello everyone, this is the part 3 of our video tutorial, which is all about internal and external institutions and influences of corporate governance. Government agencies regulate businesses includes Department of Labor and Employment Control. Control is the national government agency that is responsible for promulgating policies and programs in the field of labor and employment. The agency protects workers and their welfare by enforcing employment and labor laws. Securities and Exchange Commission oversight. The Commission's primary function is the administration of securities, analysis of ever registered security, evaluation of the financial condition, and operation of defense for security issues. Social Security System or SSS. National and foreign employees and employers earning more than $1,000 must register and pay for their SSS. Employers are required to register and pay for their employees' share of SSS, which shall be deducted from the regular working salary of their employees. Home Development Mutual Fund or HDMF. Membership of the HDMF is mandatory, therefore, all employers and employees must register and pay for the fund. Through the HDMF, members can avail hospital and psychology relief funds. Philippine Health Insurance Corporation or PhilHealth. PhilHealth is the Philippine government's healthcare corporation. The responsibility of the PhilHealth is to give its members the basic health insurance and healthcare financing. Department of Trade and Industry or DTI. For those interested in establishing sole proprietorships and registering their business names, the DTI is the office head to. It is the entity that governs the organization that promotes investments such as the Board of Investments or BOI and the Philippine Economic Zone Authority or PSI. Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR. This is the government agency mandated by law to assess and collect all national and internal revenue, taxes, fees, and all charges. All type of business entities are required to be registered. Operating Development Authority. This is the government agency that approves all types of publication of Philippines. Various local government agencies are headquarters. This is where local government permits and licenses necessary for the operation of business. other government agencies and organizations. Foreign ownership, equity, and investment. The Philippine government supports foreign investments to create employment opportunities, increase export volume, encourage the productivity of resources, and help set the foundation for economic development of the country. Ownership of land and real properties. Philippines get foreign investors and corporations. Foreign companies and investors can acquire lands as long as these are privately owned and foreign utilities and surpass a 40% cap. Aside from the private lands, foreign corporate investors also own real properties like buildings and condominiums and will invest in land properties. Incentives for registered entities. These include fiscal and non-fiscal incentives by various authorities and public agencies. Various incentives fees are available depending on location, business activity, and registration. Corporate governance structure and functions. The corporate governance structure specifies the distribution of rights and responsibilities among different stakeholders such as the board, managers, or shareholders. It spells out the rules and procedures for decision-making in corporate affairs. Internal foundation of corporate governance. The board of directors is a body elected or appointed by shareholders who jointly oversee the activities and overall managerial and operational aspects of the corporation. The chief executive officer is usually the leading organizational position and is principally accountable in carrying out the strategic policies and procedures as established by the board of directors. The chief financial officer is the senior executive responsible for managing the financial actions of the company. A shareholder, also referred to as a stockholder, is a person, company, or institution that owns at least one share of a company's stock. External environment, corporate governance, auditors. They are one of the most important external institutions in government. Their job is to help ensure that firms are running effectively, keeping public records accurate, adhering standards and reporting for public purposes, and taxes paid properly on time. Legal environment. The legal environment is where parties from the general political climate of the country. As offices, policies are highly influenced by government. The organization should have thorough knowledge of these policies because non-implementation of these legal policies results in heavy fines, penalties, and punishment, and therefore every organization must follow all these regulations. Markets. The market is considered the most important institution of corporate governance because it's where the core business process is centered. Public Act number 11282, which is the legal framework that protects corporations and companies. It is an act providing for the revised corporation code of the Philippines. This new legal framework introduces new, fresh concepts aligned with international best practices aimed at improving ease of doing business in the country. It will provide more protection for corporations and stockholders and good corporate governance.
The last part of this discussion is the Securities and Exchange Commission Code of Corporate Governance. The Code of Corporate Governance for publicly listed companies was approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission on November 10, 2016. It is intended to raise the corporate governance standards of Philippine corporations to a level at par with its regional and global counterparts. The latest G20 or OECD principles of corporate governance and the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard were used as key reference materials in the drafting of this code. Moreover, its goal is to help companies develop and sustain ethical corporate culture and keep abreast of recent developments in corporate governance. The 16 principles of governance of publicly listed companies was specified in the code. It is divided into 5 categories, namely the board's governance responsibilities, disclosure and transparency, internal control system and risk management framework, cultivating a synergic relationship with shareholders, and duties to stakeholders. There are 3 aspects of the code: the principles, recommendations, and explanations. The principles can be considered as high-level statements of corporate governance good practice and is applicable to all companies. The recommendations are of provide companies with additional information on the recommended best practice. The code adopts the comply or explain approach. This approach combines voluntary compliance with mandatory disclosure. Companies do not have to comply with the code. Still, they must state in their annual corporate governance reports whether they comply with the code provisions, identify any areas of non-compliance, and explain the reasons for non-compliance. The following are the board's governance responsibilities. First is establishing a competent board. Second is establishing clear roles and responsibilities of the board. Third is establishing board committees. Fourth is fostering commitment. Fifth is reinforcing board independence. Sixth is assessing board performance. And lastly is conducting board governance. The board should be composed of directors with a collective working knowledge, experience, or expertise that is relevant to the company's industry or sector. It should also be composed of a majority of non-executive directors who possess the necessary qualifications to effectively participate and help secure objective, independent judgment on corporate affairs and to substantiate proper checks and balances. The board should have a policy on board diversity, and applicable directors should be trained and oriented.
The committees of the board are the Audit Committee, Corporate Governance Committee, Nomination Committee, Remuneration Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and the Related Party Transaction Committee. The Audit Committee is responsible for overseeing the senior management and establishing and maintaining an adequate, effective, and efficient internal control framework. It ensures that systems and processes are designed to provide assurance in areas including reporting, monitoring compliance with rules, regulations and internal policies, efficiency and effectiveness of operations, and safeguarding of assets. The Corporate Governance Committee is tasked with ensuring compliance with and proper observance of corporate governance principles and practices. The Nomination Committee determines the nomination and election process for the company's directors. It has the special duty of defining the general profile of board members that the company may need and ensuring appropriate knowledge, competencies, and expertise that complement the existing skills of the board. The Remuneration Committee establishes a formal and transparent procedure to develop a policy for determining the remuneration of directors and officers that is consistent with the corporation's culture and strategy as well as the business environment in which it operates. The Board Risk Oversight Committee should be responsible for the oversight of the company's enterprise risk management system to ensure its functionality and effectiveness. Lastly, the Related Party Transaction Committee should be tasked with reviewing all material related party transactions of the company. That would be all for today. Thanks for watching.